At 2:10 in the morning Tehran time on June 22, 2025, the lead B-2 Spirit stealth bomber dropped 2 GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator bombs on the first of several aim points at the Fordo fuel enrichment plant, buried inside a mountain near the city of Qom. That moment, 2:10 a.m., a Sunday morning in Iran, 6:40 p.m. Eastern Time on a Saturday in Washington, marked the first time in the history of the United States military that the GBU-57 was ever used in combat. 30,000 pounds of precision-engineered, high-strength steel and conventional explosive, falling from a stealth bomber that Iran's radar network never even detected, penetrating through rock and soil toward enrichment halls, where Iran had been running advanced centrifuges for years. And then the ground shook. Joint Chiefs Chairman Air Force General Dan Kane described it afterward in those precise terms. At 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped its weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. The remaining 6 B-2 bombers then hit their own targets. 14 GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrators dropped across 2 nuclear target areas, Fordo and Natanz, in the space of a single strike package. A U.S. submarine in the region launched more than 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles against Isfahan simultaneously. Total ordnance delivered 420,000 pounds. Initial battle damage assessment from the Pentagon. All 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. That is the real-world opening data point of the Bunker Buster story. And every number in that paragraph is verified, sourced directly from General Kane's Pentagon briefing on the morning of June 22, 2025, and corroborated by satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies that showed the aftermath of what became known as Operation Midnight Hammer, called by the Joint Chiefs Chairman himself the largest B-2 operational strike in American history. Today, we are going to walk through the complete story of what happened at Fordo, how the United States built the weapon that made it possible, why it took 15 years from the discovery of the facility to the morning those bombs fell on it, what the battle damage assessment actually tells us about what was destroyed, how the Bunker Buster story continued into 2026 with a different weapon class against a different category of targets, and what the unfinished business at Pickaxe Mountain means for everything that comes next. Because the Bunker Buster story is not over. It is still being written. Start with Fordo, because understanding what this facility is and what Iran built it to be explains everything about why the United States spent 15 years engineering a bomb that could reach it. The Fordo fuel enrichment plant is built into the side of a mountain near Qom, approximately 95 miles southwest of Tehran. Construction is believed to have started around 2006, and the facility became first operational in 2009. The same year Iran publicly acknowledged its existence, only after Western intelligence services had already discovered it. That sequence matters. Iran did not declare this facility when construction began, as it was legally required to do under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty framework. It built the facility in secret, inside a mountain, with the explicit goal of creating a nuclear enrichment capability that was hardened enough to survive any conventional military strike. When the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors finally got access, they confirmed what the intelligence picture had already suggested. This was a real enrichment facility operating advanced centrifuges capable of producing highly enriched uranium. The IAEA confirmed that Iran was producing highly enriched uranium at Fordo at exactly the level of enrichment, 60%, that has no civilian nuclear application and sits one technical step below weapons-grade material. Before getting to what the GBU-57 is and how it was built, it is worth spending a moment on what Iran was actually doing inside Fordo, because the enrichment activities at that facility are not just a technical arms control violation. They represent the specific activity that makes a nuclear weapon possible. Uranium enrichment is the process of concentrating the fissile isotope uranium-235 from its natural concentration of about 0, 7% up to whatever level is required for the intended use. Reactor-grade enriched uranium for civilian power plants runs between 3 and 5%. The 60% enrichment level that Iran was running at Fordo has no legitimate civilian nuclear application. 60% sits between the practical civilian threshold and the 90% plus level that defines weapons-grade material. Getting from 60% to 90% is technically much faster and easier than getting from natural uranium to 60%. The hardest work in the enrichment process is the early stages. Iran, at 60%, was not running a civilian nuclear energy program. It was running a weapons breakout program that had completed most of the difficult technical work and was holding itself at a level that preserved the ability to sprint to weapons grade on short notice. The IAEA confirmed this. The enrichment levels are not ambiguous. The Fordo facility was not building reactor fuel. It was maintaining a breakout capability that the mountainside was protecting. Fordo is estimated to be dug approximately 80 meters beneath the surface of the mountain, roughly 260 feet of rock and soil between the mountain's exterior and the centrifuge halls inside. Before the GBU-57 existed, there was no conventional weapon in the American or Israeli arsenal that could reliably reach that depth. Israel tried. During Operation Rising Lion in June 2025, 9 days before the Americans struck, Israeli Air Force aircraft hit every Iranian nuclear facility they could reach with the weapons they had. They damaged above-ground infrastructure at Natanz. They hit power supply systems and support buildings. They struck every target that their weapons could reach, and they could not touch Fordo. The mountain protected it completely from everything Israel could throw at it. The Israeli Air Force looked at that mountain and understood that reaching what was inside it required a weapon they did not have. Only one country in the world had that weapon. And so began the phone calls. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator is a weapon that was specifically developed because of Fordo. That is not a rhetorical connection. That is the stated history of the program. When intelligence services confirmed in 2006 that Iran was constructing a deeply buried enrichment facility inside a mountain near Qom, American defense planners began the planning and technical development process that would eventually produce the GBU-57. The weapon they built weighs 30,000 pounds, 13,600 kilograms. Its warhead alone carries 6,000 pounds of explosive, 2,700 kilograms of conventional high explosive encased in a penetrating body made of high-strength steel designed to bore through the hardest materials a mountain can present before the fusing system decides it has reached the right depth to detonate. The American military says the GBU-57 can penetrate approximately 200 feet, about 61 meters, of Earth before detonating. Multiple bombs can be dropped in succession on the same aim point, with each successive weapon traveling down the channel created by the previous one and going slightly deeper before its own detonation. The concept is essentially mechanical drilling through explosive excavation, each bomb deepening the wound until the facility below is within reach of the blast radius. The GBU-57 is not a refinement of existing technology. It is a purpose-built solution to a specific problem that no other weapon could solve, reaching Fordo. That development process took 15 years. The bomb that resulted from it was first used in combat at 2:10 a.m. on a Sunday morning in Iran. Only one aircraft in the world is configured and programmed to carry the GBU-57, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The B-2 can carry 2 GBU-57s at a time inside its internal weapons bay, a total weapons load of 60,000 pounds across the 2 bombs. 7 B-2 Spirit bombers participated in Operation Midnight Hammer, each carrying 2 GBU-57s, which accounts for the 14 MOPs dropped that night. The B-2s flew from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, completing 18-hour round-trip missions that included multiple aerial refueling contacts during both the inbound and outbound legs of the flight. General Kane was specific about the mission profile. The B-2s flew with a full array of support aircraft, 4th and 5th generation fighters clearing the airspace ahead of them, refueling tankers stretched across their flight path to keep them fueled, intelligence and surveillance aircraft feeding the targeting picture, and a guided missile submarine pre-positioned in the region to strike Isfahan with Tomahawks as part of the coordinated package. More than 125 aircraft in total participated in the operation. 7 of them were B-2s. The B-2 Spirit is worth understanding in deeper detail because what it accomplished on the night of June 21st, 22nd, 2022 reflects decades of investment in a capability that most people follow from a distance without fully grasping what it actually represents. The flying wing design of the B-2 means there is no vertical tail surface, the conventional tail that makes most aircraft instantly recognizable, because vertical surfaces are among the most reflective features in radar frequency electromagnetic energy. The B-2's entire outer skin is coated in radar-absorbent materials that convert incoming radar energy into heat rather than reflecting it. Every panel joint, every weapons bay door, every sensor aperture is shaped to manage radar returns. The result is a strategic stealth bomber that can penetrate the most sophisticated air defense networks on Earth, carrying the most powerful conventional bombs ever built. Each B-2 that flew to Iran on that June night had a 2-person crew who trained for years to execute exactly this kind of mission. They flew 18 hours to deliver their 2 weapons on their assigned aim points, and 18 hours back, a 36-hour round trip during which they refueled multiple times from KC-135 and KC-46 tankers that were themselves tracked and coordinated as part of the strike package. The logistics of getting 14 30,000-pound bombs to aim points inside Iranian airspace without detection, in a coordinated sequence, simultaneously with submarine-launched Tomahawks hitting Isfahan, that level of operational complexity executed with 0 detected losses and 0 Iranian defensive response is a demonstration of American military capability that has no equivalent anywhere on Earth. The operational secrecy achieved during Midnight Hammer was extraordinary and deserves to be understood in its full detail because it tells you something important about the gap in capability between what the United States can do and what Iran was able to detect and respond to. The B-2 Spirit is a stealth bomber with a radar cross-section approximately equal to that of a large bird, a design outcome that results from the flying wing configuration, the radar-absorbing materials in its skin, and the careful shaping of every surface and edge to redirect radar energy away from the source. Iran's integrated air defense network, which includes Russian-supplied S-300 surface-to-air missile systems, should in theory have been capable of detecting inbound aircraft. It did not detect these. Kane was explicit at the Pentagon briefing. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. He added, "We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in, and unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. 7 B-2 bombers flew into Iranian airspace, dropped 14 30,000-pound bombs on 2 of Iran's most protected nuclear facilities, and flew out again. Iran's air defense network failed to detect a single one of them. The deception package for the mission also included sending other B-2s on a flight path toward Guam to create a false picture of where the bombers were operating, maintaining the secrecy of the real strike package until weapons were away." As Kane put it, the bombers were in and out and back without the world knowing it all. The sequence of events on the night of the strike unfolded in layers that were specifically designed to maximize the cumulative effect on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. About an hour before the B-2s reached their targets, the U.S. submarine in the region launched its Tomahawk salvo against Isfahan, the site where uranium hexafluoride, the chemical form of uranium used in centrifuges, is converted from raw uranium. Taking Isfahan offline meant disrupting the supply chain that feeds Fordo and Natanz, even if the centrifuge halls themselves survived the night. Then, as the B-2s closed on their targets, fighters ahead of the package checked the airspace and confirmed there were no Iranian intercepts rising to meet them. At 6:40 p.m. Eastern, the lead B-2 dropped its first 2 GBU-57s on Fordo. The remaining 6 bombers followed through their own aim points. Fordo received 12 of the 14 MOPs. Natanz received 2. Each bomb dropped on Fordo was aimed at specific aim points. The language Kane used, the first of several aim points, indicates that the targeting plan was not simply one location on the mountain, but a coordinated sequence designed to ensure that successive bombs deepened the penetration and maximized the probability of reaching the centrifuge halls at depth. The Tomahawks struck Isfahan last, once the bombers were already aggressing Iranian airspace. Initial battle damage assessment indicated all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. Kane called it the largest B-2 operational strike in American history and added, "No other military in the world could have done this." The honest assessment of what that battle damage actually represents, what was definitively destroyed versus what remains uncertain, is the part of this story that the initial headlines did not fully convey, and that matters enormously for understanding the 2026 continuation. The above-ground infrastructure at all 3 sites was destroyed. Power supply systems, ventilation infrastructure access points, support buildings, personnel facilities, above-ground entry points, all of that went. At Fordo specifically, the GBU-57s targeting the ventilation shafts created a scenario where even if the centrifuge halls themselves were not physically collapsed by the blasts, the support systems that make operation of those halls possible, fresh air circulation, electrical infrastructure, physical access for personnel and equipment, were severely compromised or destroyed. However, the extent to which the centrifuge halls deep inside the mountain were actually reached and physically destroyed by the penetrating warheads remains a subject of ongoing analysis rather than confirmed certainty. Iran denied significant damage and pledged retaliation, the regime's standard public position after any strike on its nuclear infrastructure. Independent analysts at the Institute for Science and International Security noted that the damage to Fordo's surface infrastructure was visible and severe in satellite imagery, while the subsurface results were harder to definitively confirm. The honest position is that the 15 years of planning and the precision of the delivery produced the most damaging attack on Iranian nuclear infrastructure ever conducted. Whether it constitutes complete destruction of Fordo's enrichment capability as opposed to severe degradation is an assessment that continued imagery analysis and intelligence collection is still developing. The immediate international reaction to the Midnight Hammer battle damage assessment also deserves attention because it reveals how the world's most sophisticated nuclear monitoring community processed what happened. The IAEA Director General confirmed that the strikes had direct impacts on the underground centrifuge halls at Natanz. The word direct was specific and chosen deliberately. It was not a diplomatic hedge. Satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies showed major collapse features at the surface directly above where the centrifuge halls were mapped underground, which is consistent with the kind of subsurface detonation a GBU-57 following its designed penetration trajectory would produce. David Albright at the Institute for Science and International Security, who had argued before the strikes that Fordo was buried so deeply it would be difficult to destroy in an air attack, assessed the post-strike imagery and found evidence of severe damage to the facility's infrastructure that went beyond the above-ground access points. The 12 GBU-57 impact points at Fordo, visible in post-strike satellite imagery, showed a pattern consistent with targeting multiple aim points along the facility's underground footprint rather than concentrating all strikes at a single entrance. That pattern suggests the targeting plan was engineered to maximize coverage of the facility's subsurface extent rather than simply creating one deep penetration at a single point. The evidence available in the open-source domain points to severe, probably disabling damage. The question of complete destruction versus severe functional degradation is the difference between Iran needing years to reconstitute versus needing decades. Either outcome represents a historic setback for the Iranian nuclear program. That uncertainty is part of why the 2026 continuation of the bunker buster story matters. Operation Epic Fury, which began February 28, 2026, brought the GBU-72 Advanced 5K Penetrator into combat at scale for the first time in the Iran theater. Where the GBU-57 was the answer for the deepest, most hardened underground facilities, the GBU-72 at 5,000 pounds became the workhorse for the distributed network of IRGC ballistic missile storage bunkers, hardened command nodes, drone storage facilities built into hillsides, and hardened coastal infrastructure that made up Iran's military capability along the Strait of Hormuz. The GBU-72 uses GPS and inertial navigation guidance, eliminating the laser designation requirement of older systems. It can be carried by B-1B Lancers and F-15E Strike Eagles, which means it can be deployed at a rate and scale that the B-2-only GBU-57 cannot match. Over 13 consecutive nights of strikes beginning in July 2026, the GBU-72 was delivered against IRGC underground infrastructure at Tabriz, at coastal facilities along the strait, at missile storage complexes built into hillsides across Iran's ballistic missile network. The secondary explosions visible in the strike footage, the cascading detonations from solid rocket propellant inside those facilities, igniting after the penetrating bomb reached them, documented the real-world effectiveness of the GBU-72 against the target set it was designed for. The largest conventional bomb in the arsenal handled the deepest targets in June 2025. The midweight precision penetrator handled the distributed network in 2026. Together, they represent a two-tier bunker buster capability that the American military has now used in actual combat against the most consequential underground military infrastructure on Earth. And the scale of what the GBU-72 accomplished across those 13 consecutive nights of July 2026 strikes is worth quantifying because it provides context for the 2026 bunker buster story that the GBU-57 alone does not cover. CENTCOM documented strikes across at least 6 cities along Iran's southern coastline simultaneously: Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, Jask, Abu Musa, Bushehr, all hit within the same 5-hour strike window. Drone storage facilities at Tabriz in northwestern Iran, which the IRGC had built to look like agricultural buildings from above while storing Shahed drone components and ballistic missile guidance systems inside, took direct GBU-72 hits that produced the cascading secondary explosions, visible in strike footage as stored propellant ignited in sequence. The targeting of IRGC ballistic missile infrastructure at underground sites across Iran documented impact patterns consistent with the GBU-72's penetration envelope, facilities buried into hillsides that the GBU-28 might have struggled to fully reach, but that the GPS-guided GBU-72 could be directed to specific aim points on, with the precision that older laser-guided weapons required favorable atmospheric and electronic conditions to achieve. Excavators and construction equipment at Iranian military sites were specifically targeted, destroying the reconstitution machinery that would allow the IRGC to repair damaged bunkers, remove debris from tunnel entrances, and roll launchers back into operational status. The targeting of recovery infrastructure extended the operational timeline of damage beyond what the strikes alone created, and it reflected a targeting philosophy that understood the IRGC's resilience doctrine: repair quickly and return to operation, and specifically engineered against it. The Taliban 2 facility deserves mention here because it adds a specific data point to the 2026 continuation of the story. The War Zone and other defense publications reported in March 2026 on what appeared to be large impact craters at the Taliban 2 nuclear-related facility, a site that had been newly encased in a concrete shell and then covered with soil in the months leading up to the conflict, apparently in an attempt to harden it against the kind of strike that hit Fordo in 2025. The impact point dimensions at Taliban 2 were consistent with GBU-57 strikes, based on comparison with the documented craters at Fordo and Natanz from Operation Midnight Hammer. If those impacts were indeed from GBU-57s, it would mean the B-2s flew another Midnight Hammer-style mission in the early weeks of 2026, without the same level of public disclosure as the June 2025 strikes. Israel confirmed it struck Taliban 2, though the weapons used were not publicly specified. What the satellite imagery established is that a facility Iran had gone to considerable effort to newly harden against penetrating strikes was struck by weapons capable of leaving impact craters consistent with the heaviest bunker busters in existence. The nuclear material question, the 441 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity that Iran held as of the latest IAEA accounting, connects the bunker buster story to its most important unresolved chapter. Destroying centrifuge facilities eliminates the production capacity for more enriched uranium. It does not make the uranium already produced disappear. Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium predates both Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Epic Fury. Some portion of it was stored at Fordo and Natanz before the June 2025 strikes. CNN reported that Iran has been deliberately collapsing tunnel sections and booby-trapping entrances with explosive mines to protect its highly enriched uranium cache, making physical recovery or accounting for the material difficult, even in scenarios where the surrounding infrastructure is destroyed. IAEA Director General Grossi confirmed in March 2026 that approximately 200 kilograms of Iran's highly enriched uranium were believed to be in deep tunnels at nuclear complexes outside Isfahan, with the remainder at other sites. President Trump pointed specifically to the uranium in public statements. We follow the material. That framing, tracking the enriched uranium itself rather than simply the facilities where it was produced, tells you something important about how the intelligence picture is being worked. The centrifuges can be rebuilt. Enriched uranium at 60% purity represents years of output from those centrifuges. It is the irreplaceable asset that the nuclear program ultimately exists to produce, and locating it, accounting for it, and ensuring it cannot be weaponized is the end-state objective that all the bombing is in service of. Which brings us to Pickaxe Mountain, the one facility that has not yet received the bunker buster treatment, and that sits at the center of every strategic conversation about where this conflict goes from here. The site is buried at least 100 meters into ancient Zagros granite, potentially deeper in certain sections. The GBU-57 was built for and validated against Fordo, which sat approximately 80 meters beneath rock and soil. The additional depth and the granite geology at Pickaxe Mountain represent a penetration challenge that goes beyond what Operation Midnight Hammer definitively solved. American officials have reportedly discussed using 2 GBU-57s in sequence on the same aim point to achieve the additional depth the facility requires, the same sequential penetration concept that worked at Fordo, pushed to its limits against harder rock at greater depth. Whether the physics allows that approach to reach the centrifuge assembly infrastructure believed to have been moved inside the mountain, thousands of centrifuges per Israeli intelligence assessment, is a question that targeting planners and weapons engineers are working through with classified models and simulation tools that do not appear in public reporting. Trump's public statements have been unambiguous about intent. The area will be hit pretty soon and very heavily. His added comment, that there's not a thing Iran can do about it, reflects the reality that the air defense suppression campaign of the last 5 months has degraded the threat environment around that target to the point where delivery is not the constraint. Getting the bomb to the mountain is solved. What the bomb can do once it arrives is the remaining engineering question. Here is something else that deserves to be in the full picture before the strategic analysis, what the Iranian government said and did in the immediate aftermath of Midnight Hammer, because the contrast between their public statements and the satellite imagery is instructive about how the regime processes catastrophic military setbacks. In the hours after the strikes, Iranian state media broadcast statements denying significant damage. Officials said enrichment activities would continue. Supreme leader statements described the attack as a failure that would unite the Iranian people behind the revolution. Meanwhile, Planet Labs satellites were showing collapse craters at the surface of Fordo directly above the mapped centrifuge hall locations, and the IAEA was saying publicly that direct impacts on underground centrifuge infrastructure had been confirmed. The gap between Iranian state media denial and independent satellite and IAEA confirmation is not a minor discrepancy. It is a structural feature of how the Iranian regime communicates military defeats, publicly deny everything, privately assess the damage, reconstitute what can be reconstituted, and use the denial to buy time for the next phase. That pattern has been consistent across every military engagement Iran has experienced in this conflict period, and understanding it is essential for interpreting any Iranian public statement about the condition of its nuclear infrastructure. Here is the 4D chess strategic analysis. The United States dropped the most powerful conventional bomb ever built on Iranian nuclear infrastructure on June 22, 2025, for the first time in history, 15 years after the program began, at the specific facility that drove the weapons development. The operation was executed with total secrecy, 0 losses, and 0 Iranian defensive response. The largest B-2 strike in American history went into Iranian airspace carrying 14 30,000-pound bombs, dropped them all, and came home while Iran's radar network failed to detect a single aircraft. That operational outcome is not just a military result. It is a demonstration of the asymmetry between American military capability and Iranian military capability that has been building for the entire duration of the GBU-57 development program. Iran built Fordo to be immune to conventional attack. The United States built a weapon to breach that immunity and then flew 7 stealth bombers undetected through Iranian airspace to use it. The 15 years of planning and engineering invested in that outcome produced a 15-minute strike package that Iran's entire air defense architecture could not prevent or even detect. The 2026 continuation of the bunker buster campaign has filled in the portion of Iran's underground military infrastructure below the nuclear program. The ballistic missile storage bunkers, the hardened command nodes, the IRGC military apparatus whose destruction is the prerequisite for any sustainable resolution to the Strait of Hormuz crisis. The GBU-72 has handled that work efficiently and at scale in ways that the GBU-57 was never designed for. And the unfinished business at Pickaxe Mountain represents the final chapter of the weapons development story that began when American intelligence services looked at a mountain near Qom in 2006 and decided that if Iran was going to hide its nuclear program underground, the United States was going to build something to follow it down. The GBU-57 followed it to Fordo. Whether it can follow the centrifuges that Iran moved from Fordo to Pickaxe Mountain after Fordo was struck is the question that the next phase of this conflict is building toward answering. The bomb exists. The aircraft that carries it is ready. The air defense picture has been prepared. What comes next is a decision and a set of physics calculations that will determine whether the GBU-57's reach extends to the deepest nuclear fortress Iran has ever built. The story of the bunker buster in Iran also carries an important lesson about the relationship between weapons development timelines and geopolitical patience. The GBU-57 program began in 2006 because American planners looked at a mountain in Iran and decided that eventually something might need to reach what was inside it. They did not know in 2006 when that moment would come. They did not know whether it would come before or after Iran reached weapons-grade enrichment. They did not know whether diplomatic options would resolve the nuclear question before the military option was needed. They started building the weapon anyway, because the cost of not having it when it was needed, a nuclear-armed Iran with its centrifuges safely behind a mountain that nothing in the Western arsenal could reach, was unacceptably high. That 15-year development investment paid off at 2:10 a.m. on June 22, 2025, when 7 stealth bombers arrived over Iranian airspace with the weapons that program had produced. The lesson for the present moment is direct. The GBU-57 exists and is proven. The question of whether it can solve the Pickaxe Mountain problem, a harder target at greater depth and denser rock, is the question that determines whether the weapons development investment the United States made applies to the next and potentially most consequential underground nuclear facility Iran has ever built. What do you think? Do you believe that GBU-57 strikes at Fordow and Natanz in June 2025 definitively destroyed Iran's enrichment capability there? Or does the uncertainty in the battle damage assessment leave open the possibility that Iran reconstituted faster than we know? With Pickaxe Mountain still standing, does the unfinished nuclear chapter of this conflict represent the single biggest remaining military decision facing the United States right now? And given that Iran moved its centrifuges to deeper granite, specifically, after watching what the GBU-57 did to Fordo, what does that tell you about the regime's long-term nuclear strategy, regardless of what happens militarily in the short term? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because these questions do not have easy answers and the conversation matters. If this full breakdown gave you context that isolated news coverage could not, share it with someone who needs to understand what bunker buster bombs actually are and what they have actually done. Hit subscribe so you do not miss a single update on this conflict. It is still very much in motion. The final chapter of the bunker buster story has not been written yet, and we will be right here when it is. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We will see you in the next one.